Hello and welcome to this session. My name is Heba Musa. I'm a Sustainable Mobility Officer at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. I'm making this session today to introduce a new framework to addressing gender on road safety frameworks, especially the Safe Systems approach. This will cover the gender blind spots in the road safety sector, hopefully, and we can take from this e-learning module some lessons to apply in all our road safety work. This framework was developed within the TransSafe project, Transforming Road Safety in Africa, and it's funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program. By the end of the session, you will be able to have practical guide for assessing the efficacy of road safety interventions and designs for a diverse population. So you can also see the gender issues within the road safety sector. Let's start with the problem. Road crashes kill 1.2 almost people every year, and it remains the leading cause of death for children and young people worldwide. But that risk is not shared equally. Women face a 73% higher risk of serious injury in an equivalent frontal crash, since vehicle safety has been engineered around the male body. And we will come back to this point in the safe vehicles element. And meanwhile, men are around 3 times more likely to be in a crash in the first place. They drive more, faster, and take greater risks, and that holds across every country where this has been measured. And there is a third number that rarely appears in road safety statistics at all, that in some countries up to 80% of the women avoid public transport because of the fear of sexual harassment. That pushes them into longer walks and riskier routes and making them a vulnerable road user group. The foundation we build on is the Safe System approach created by World Health Organization, which is explained in another TransSafe e-learning course. I link it here. Here we look on how each of those 5 pillars are gendered and how to take informed actions to those gender issues. Here we look at the second block. That's a framework that was designed by UN Women to ensure gender transformative actions across different sectors. So we have here a ladder, sort of 2 steps with negative impacts. Those are gender unequal interventions. These 3 create gender inequality actions, and the gender blind actions that they don't take in consideration the gender element and that we live in a gendered world. And then there are 3 positive steps of the ladder: the gender sensitive step, where you acknowledge that women and men experience the world differently and also the road. You collect sex disaggregated data and you make women's journey visible, but you don't yet act on it. So that comes in the second step of the ladder, positively, the gender responsive. Here you act on what you know about gender issues and you design interventions that target specific gaps. The data reveals the infrastructure gaps and you act on them here in this area. And the third step and the most important is gender transformative actions, and that's where you stop adjusting and existing the system around the gender roles and you're changing who holds power within this system and who designs the road, who takes decisions, etc., to have a holistic equal system. And here we need to keep the distinction, because the difference between responsive and transformative is the difference between like an unfair system that is now working better and building a whole fairer system. For each pillar now we will look at the problem and then cases where a solution is offered in each of the ladder steps, especially the positive ones. Let's begin with the road itself. Physical design, including the road surface, the lighting, and crossings, decide who can move safely in the street and who is a vulnerable road user. In most African cities, we still have design standards from colonial and post-colonial eras where it's mostly motor vehicle centric and it doesn't prioritize pedestrian movement. Knowing that most movement in Africa happens on foot or by bicycles in urban areas at least, over half of Africa's road deaths are vulnerable road users, and pedestrians alone are roughly a third of all fatalities. Now, if we add the gender element to that, women walk more and they make shorter chain trips, often after dark as well, leading to family errands, running family errands, going to the market or taking care trips. And if we're lacking the pedestrian infrastructure, then women are put in this situation where they are at greater risk on everyday basis journeys. We are looking here at 3 levels of responses. One is the gender sensitive response. On the data level, in Morocco, a World Bank project collected data, 6 disaggregated data from Casablanca and Agadir, that then fed into the BRT infrastructure project, but at the knowledge and information level, that was a gender sensitive action where they looked at the safety of women and men differently and analyzed the problem that faces each group separately. On the gender responsive level, we have an action from the Philippines National Department of Public Work. They built a checklist that feeds into the feasibility studies and terms of references, meaning that gender was considered before the project or road is designed. So at each step of the road design, they have things to check, and contractors and operators as well. They need to abide by these checklists and not having gender as an afterthought after the project has been constructed. And we have another action from TransSafe project that was a demonstration project in Zambia where a school zone have been made safe, or 15 schools in Lusaka, and that reported 30% safer streets. And that benefits not only children, but the caretakers, mostly women who take children to schools. We have here also a gender transformative action from the DR Congo, where the World Bank project provided lighting, cameras, pedestrian lanes, and official fee boards to redesign a whole border crossing area where women traders were facing robbery and sexual harassment and leading them to be in a vulnerable safety situation. This transformation affected their ortho-economic situation because they saved a lot of money that they previously paid as bribes, or they were also sometimes pushed in sex work where they needed to get a lift from a country to another and facing a risk of sexually transmitted diseases. And now they are safer because of a road intervention that made them cross safely from a country to another and doing their day-to-day business. Now to the pillar where the gender gap is the greatest, in my opinion. The African vehicle safety here, we have a contextual problem because a lot of African countries rely on imported second-hand vehicles that built with outdated standards or unregulated standards. And then we have a global problem where crash tests are made on dummies that have been modeled on 77 kilograms, 177 centimeter male body, and with a male muscle mass and male bone density and male seated posture. The so-called female dummy is used in regulation today. Is not automatic. It's not anatomically female. It's a scaled-down male body, So the result of that is women face a 47% higher risk of serious injury, and that goes up to 73% in recent studies. And they are 17% more likely to be killed in an equivalent frontal crash, even when wearing a seatbelt. What does action look like here? On the gender sensitive area, we are still talking about data collection. We have a case from Argentina's National Road Observatory that published crash data disaggregated by gender. That showed men are 75% of driver fatalities, while women die mostly as pedestrians and passengers. That already gives an orientation to identify the risks for different groups of population and act accordingly. It can also guide a change in regulations. On the gender responsive element, we have some advancement in the testing world. Sweden's research institute developed the first average female crash models, and also in the US, they approved an advanced female dummy in 2026. In Europe, we have the NCAP's Vision 2030 that integrates female protocols as well. Crucially, there is also an open source virtual average female body model. It's called Viva Plus, and it's free to use by any company. So it's an open source model, and it gives somehow it opens the door for more advancement in this field. This, of course, is a transformative frontier. But then we have to acknowledge that no African market yet requires a gender-inclusive crashworthiness for imported vehicles, and that stays an area for intervention. Then we can also orient here towards more advocacy with the African governments to impose more regulations on imported vehicles. The third pillar is about behavior, and road user behavior is gendered, of course. It's gendered in two directions. Direction one is the risk-taking behavior. There is a survey across African countries that shows men consistently reported a higher acceptance of speeding, drunk driving, and phone use behind the wheel than women. And it's also a global pattern that is in most surveyed countries worldwide. This is seen as part of the masculine identity, linking it to risk-taking in general. Direction two is a structural threat because women face sexual harassment as transport users and by people in moving vehicles, which is a physical road safety threat, added to the sexual and psychological threats, of course. It determines whether women travel at all because women can fear for their safety and rely on walking and become more vulnerable on the road. On the solutions front, we have gender-sensitive action from Egypt, where a crowdsourcing platform called Harassmap was set in 2008. It was launched with the landmark film called 678 about sexual harassment in public transportation. And that made harassment visible at a national scale and fed directly into the 2014 criminalization of harassment law. But at the basic level, it was still a data collection action. So the Harassmap was a crowdsourcing platform and it addressed the acknowledgement of harassment. This as well as the film. On the gender responsive level, in Kenya, the Flown Initiative's Usalama wa Umma program delivers a certified gender-based violence training to transport operators. They trained over 550 workers, and this treats harassment prevention and road safety as a professional responsibility by the operators and public transport authorities, and really addresses the problem at and action level. On the gender transformative level, we have a Safe Taxi Charter from South Africa, where 9 minibus and taxi associations collectively representing almost 500 vehicles across Cape Town introduced a safe minibus taxi charter. And this was backed by 95% of more than 1,100 passengers who were surveyed locally, and built on a research by women advocacy groups that introduced the information how women are unsafe in public transportation, and then the taxi operators acted based on that already and supported their data by post-intervention surveys. The fourth pillar on multimodal mobility and land use. Here we have a gender problem with the car-centric planning that separates homes from everything else, including work and care trips. And that affects women mobility because women mobility, as we mentioned before, looks like chained small trips, taking children to school, going to market, going to a clinic, going to work, and then to home again. And that combines walking and informal transport in most African countries. These trip chains are normally invisible in surveys because even if one leg of the trip, the walking part, is ignored, then women are invisible in the mobility data. And the pedestrian risk is therefore also not well counted. There are other factors like social norms. So women's mobility is affected by the cultural norms around mobility. In a lot of African countries, women are not allowed to cycle, for example. So there stays a whole mode of mobility or two modes of mobility where women cannot access them, and they are pushed in very limited mobility situation. We have here an amazing gender-sensitive action from Bogota and Medellin, where researchers reanalyzed existing survey data with a gender lens and looked at care trips for paid care workers. And they mapped their trips in general. That includes the paid care work and the unpaid care work, where they care for their own children. And they found out that each of these paid care workers made 4 to 7 daily care trips before going to work and afterwards. And this information fed into a national survey and produced a documentary as well, and that showed the invisible work that is also like this part of work. The trip itself is not paid. And on the gender responsive level, we stay in Colombia, where Bogota acted on this invisible care trips and care trips for unpaid care workers, with 25 care blocks that were constructed to provide services for caregivers, and is centered around a neighborhood level and rural areas. So they provide just one walking trip for each of the care workers, and they don't have to chain trips, and that already reduces their risk on the road. We have another example from Egypt in the Fayoum Governorate, where a bike sharing system was established, and it connected the female dorms to the university, and that gave the female students the opportunity to cycle in a country that has only 1% of the people who cycle are women. And that works on two levels. One, it gives access to these students, and the second is the visibility of a female cyclist that can encourage more women to cycle in the future and make the road safer for all. And on the transformative level, we have the car bus rapid transit system that raised women's share of workforce from 6% on the baseline to 43%. And that's a huge raise. And this includes bus driver, conductors, and employees in the system in general. This makes the system not only safe for women, but also an economic empowerment for women. The final pillar addresses post-crash care. We have a problem here with fewer than half of sub-Saharan African countries with a formal pre-hospital care. And for women, they have three barriers compounded before any clinical decision is made. This includes a problem with awareness because survey showed that women are significantly less likely to know emergency services exist or to reach them. And the second one is the economic access, because women are also less likely to hold insurance or have access to a smartphone, for example, and more often carry the cost of crashes as caregivers. And the third one is a clinical bias, where women wait roughly 30 minutes longer in emergency departments, as some researchers show, and they often receive less pain relief for identical complaints as men, and they receive less um, byst- bystander CPR services, and there is also here the factor that 95% of CPR training is done on mannequins that are flat-chested, so it doesn't account for all women's bodies. To address this, we can always start with acknowledging the problem. A gender-sensitive action from Nigeria was a study that found that only 41% of respondents knew emergency services existed. That was a study for women. And being a woman significantly predicted that not knowing that emergency services existed means that you're at greater risk after the crash. So awareness campaigns must reach women first through markets, for example, or community health workers and schools. On the gender responsive actions, we have two levers. Documented medical protocols that requires written justification whenever a pain medication is withheld. And on an action level, our sister project AfroSafe has produced a phased costed post-crash action plan for Ghana, Zambia, and Tanzania. This was ready for government adoption, and this can improve the post-crash care action significantly. On the transformative level, we have a community action that is not from the road safety sector, but it was born as uh, a response to armed conflicts. So in Sudan, after the state institutions collapsed in 2023, women volunteer built hundreds of women's emergency response rooms from scratch, and that included trauma care, protection, evacuation, with no state support at all. So women here provided the whole system with emergency response and care, and this is a community action that goes towards the whole population, and that ensures also women's inclusion and women's safety, and that as well raised the status of women in the Sudanese society because they were first responders in this conflict. So let me close where we started, as gender equity is a precondition for Vision Zero. And we have three things to take with us here. First, that we need to collect sex disaggregated data everywhere because we cannot fix a problem that we don't see. And second, is to design for women's real journeys, including care trips and walking after dark and chain trips as well, and diversify the modes of mobility available for women. And third is to always evaluate who's protected and who's taking the decisions regarding road safety on all the 5 pillars of road safety. And if any group is not represented, we need to take an audit of that and reintroduce this group in the system, because a safe system is a safe system for all, and that's how we can account for safety for women and men equally. Thank you for joining this session today, and hopefully you find this useful information and apply it to your work. And here I added selected references from the presentation, and you can find more on the Transafe website. Thank you.